Welcome to the Savage Worlds GM podcast on air. I'm your host, Jared Savage Daddy Gunning. Tonight's episode brought to you by Roll20.net, the world's largest virtual tabletop. Go check them out today at Roll20.net. Follow the show we're on Twitter at SWGM Podcast, on Facebook at SWGM Podcast. Check out the YouTube channel at, SWGM Podcast. And subscribe to iTunes. Subscribe to the show on iTunes, Savage Worlds Game Master Podcast. Tonight's topic, oral tradition. Go ahead, everybody, get the jokes out now. I don't want any teetering and teeing as we go along. Go ahead, feel free. And here to discuss it, Chris, the Savage Bobby Fox.
Hello.
Dave, the rules David Scott, not safe for work, children, or nuns.
Greetings and salutations.
And Dustin, the Savage Intern.
Hello, nurse.
So can I start with a question at the very beginning?
One quick antidote. We are if anybody's watching the stream live in the YouTube live events, go ahead, feel free to comment in there. We will be addressing those as the show progresses. Go ahead, Chris.
Never mind. I'm going to ask it later. I changed my mind.
Okay, well, now I got a question. What was your question?
It was nothing about what was happening right now.
Oh, okay.
Was it in line with our first viewer question?
No, we have a first viewer question.
We do. Go ahead, read it off, Dave.
So Carlin Kendrick decided to jump right in and with the oral tradition puns and whatnot, jumps right in with it. Ooh, Jared, fresh out of the shower, color me flustered.
See, I knew this was going to happen, Dave. I do it, and I blame you. I blame everybody. Everybody, let's give Dave a good round of applause. Nice going on picking a topic, Dave.
Hey.
So, Dave,
really deep topic.
Why don't you explain what we mean by the oral tradition? Go ahead.
So, oral tradition typically talks about things like passing on oral histories and things like that within tribal lore. It was often that art of storytelling around the fire where the elder of the tribe would pass on the history of the tribe to everyone else. The funny thing is, what we do as a hobby is directly descended from that. It's still that communal storytelling. The GM is the elder taking the process of passing that on. The funny aspect of that is there's other aspects of that oral tradition that have been inherited by gaming as well. Things like the fact that I would say probably 80% of the people I've ever played the game with didn't pick the book up until well after they had been taught to play the game by a GM somewhere. They didn't pick the book up until there was something that they failed to have an answer to from that GM, or they decided they were going to become a GM themselves. So there's this entire tradition of every game master teaches the group of players they're playing with. And I think that's also reinforces the whole house rule scene, the hack scene we see where people take and try to do, things that the game systems aren't designed to do with it, because they have that freedom as a GM to just take this thing and teach it to other people in the manner that works best for their game.
Well, yeah, it's that thing that we've talked about before too, where everybody thinks Joker's wild. It's just a rule in the game.
Yeah.
And the first time you show up and you're not having Joker's wild in the setting and someone draws a Joker, woo! No, don't everybody get excited. We're not using that setting rule.
Right.
Wait, what do you mean?
What do you mean setting rule?
That's part of Savage Worlds.
Because that person had never opened the book and read through it to see that, no, Joker's wild is something extra that's added in. The normal rule doesn't allow you to do that. And I think there's a big aspect of that, not just in the rules confusion, but also in that aspect of, no, I don't want to narrate what my character does. I told you I attack the guy. Now you tell me what that looks like. And there's a reason why that onus falls back on the GM to do all of this storytelling and weaving, because the oral tradition was the elder sat at the campfire telling a story to everyone else. And the GM has taken up that spot. So I think there's an awful lot here to unpack as to how gaming really has grown out of that tradition.
Yeah, I think I just want to interject that when standard people learn any skill, they don't have a foundation for that skill until they've been practicing for 20 hours. And that whole sitting around the campfire, that oral tradition, is sort of how those foundational skills are built. And so when people don't ever just read the book, I don't think people pick up the book and read it before anything else, because it's just words. They actually learn by playing. At least I did, and I think after people have learned foundationally a little bit, that's when they go back and they say, well, I had this question or I had that question. But they still have those like gaps and those little deviations, you know?
Well, I also it's a good point, and I'd like to throw this out there too. There's also something to be said for the quote unquote experts in the community, whether that be the Savage Worlds community, whether we're talking about Clint Black, whether we're talking about a podcast host, present company included, or podcast host of another podcast, when they share their viewpoint on something, this is how it works. That sort of becomes written in the rule book mentally for a lot of people. And we're human. We make mistakes. And the nice thing about at least this podcast is when we do it, we own it and go, oh, nope, look, we completely fucked up. We've said this in the past. Nope, that's completely wrong.
Yeah, and that's what I was gonna say is you have that tradition, but you hope that the person passing that tradition on, and in our case, passing that game on, is doing it correctly with, you know, the correct rules and the correct way to play the game, and not just, you know, making up their own rules, because that's when you have that problem of, okay, well, you go to a different game table and you're like, oh yeah, this is how this rule works, and then everybody at the table's like, no, that's not even close to how the rule works. And then, well, yeah, it is. That's how we play it. And like, well, you're playing a house rule.
What's this soak thing you talk about?
Yeah. You're using a house rule, whether you know you're using a house rule or not.
I have 3 hit points left.
Well, and this is one that comes up often too, is, oh, well, no, you can use intimidation against a group of people. It's a skill. No. It only gets one person. You can use a smarts trick or an agility trick against a group. Well, as far one person actually, but the group gets the entire benefit.
Your whole trick gets the benefit of a smarts trick or agility. Right. You cannot smarts trick the entire opposing team.
Wouldn't that be awesome?
See, here we go. This is what I'm talking about, though. Is that responsibility of?
Well, that would be an awesome edge. Every time you take the edge, you can, you know, do a smarts trick on 2 or more people at a time. Every time you take the edge. Hey, Clint, if you're listening, that'd be an awesome thing in like another edition.
I think though there's an interesting aspect of the you've been taught the rule wrong aspect of it is, and you know, I have no statistics or anything on it for Savage Worlds specifically, but I know Milton Bradley back in the 90s, I believe it was, actually did like a big survey of people as to how they played Monopoly, and they ended up releasing a special edition version of the game. They came with a pamphlet of all these house rules that people had instituted and played in their homes, because no one played it according to the actual rules in the book that comes with the game, because they had all been taught by somebody else who had cut out a rule or added free parking as the place that all the money goes from.
Right, I was going to say, yeah, that's not a rule. Free parking is not a rule.
You know, there's all these little things that build up over time. And, you know, we've talked about the idea within Savage Worlds that there are certain aspects of Savage Worlds that honestly have become the community has created it as a rule. You know, probably the biggest example being, again, Jared's example with Joker's Wild, where so many people play that way that it might as well be the standard rule that everyone gets a penny when the Joker comes out, because it's just ubiquitous. There's not a Savage out there who doesn't expect that, because it's run in so many games.
Right, and the opposite is true too. It's about what you get used to as well. Dave made an allusion to our Dead End campaign. For anybody who doesn't know what we're talking about, we brought a new person. Yeah, that would be the zombie game. We brought a new player who'd never played anything but Pathfinder into the game, never played Savage Worlds before. Told him, you know, hey, we'll show you how to play. We'll teach you how to play. And in that game, it's a zombie survival game. You don't get to soak. There's no soaking wounds. You take the wound. And the first time we tried to play another game and he took 2 wounds, he was like, fuck. I'm like, dude, you can soak it. I can what? Yeah, there's bennies. You can spend a benny, make a vigor roll, and that damage never happened. It's called soaking. What? What the fuck are you talking about? You can't, what? We had to like actually take time out of the game to teach him one of the basic tenets of Savage Worlds, because he had played in a game setting where the setting rule was you don't get to soak.
I've dealt with the exact same thing where a player was not aware that they could take multiple actions. And it wasn't until another player in the game did it, and they said, well, wait, why are you letting him cheat? Like, no, that's standard to Savage Worlds, but this guy had come from a group where he had been taught the game by somebody else, and in that group, that GM was so tied to the way that other systems had played, where everybody gets 1 action. He didn't want anyone to feel like, well, so-and-so took 4 actions and his turns got more weight than mine. Why does he get away with doing 4 things and I only get to do 1? That GM made this conscious decision that wasn't something that was fun for his table, removes multi-action penalty, removes the ability to take multiple actions, and now this player transplants over into a new game, and he's completely crippled by the fact that he's never taking a multi-action because he doesn't know he can. And, you know, there's where that responsibility that Chris is talking about. You have to take the time to make sure that if you're going to teach your players the game, either direct them to go back and look at the rule book after you've taught them, or make sure to let them know when what you're teaching them is something that's just your rule, so that when they do sit down at Chris's table at a con, they're not expecting Chris to run with your rules.
Exactly. Just say, hey, this is not how it's written, but this is how I run it. That simple statement right there.
One of the things that I've come across that just boggles my mind is when you have players that have been playing for even a year or 2 years and they don't understand that settings have setting rules. And you're just like, no, this is a universal system. That means that there are different things that can be added or taken away, and you should know how they affect it. For example, trappings and effects.
Oh, a great example for trappings and effects is the difference between trappings in core and trappings in Deadlands, where in Deadlands, the trappings are baked into the power based on which of the arcane backgrounds you take. You know, the huckster who takes armor, it always works the same way. That trapping is listed right with the power for the way it looks and feels and acts for the huckster. And it doesn't matter if it's Dustin's huckster or Jared's huckster or Chris's huckster, it's all going to work the same way. Now, I think most Savages today play it closer to core, where each individual player gets to create it, but core's ability for each player to create their own trapping is very different from Deadlands. And that is absolutely something that's supposed to be part and parcel to that Old West theme and everything that goes into that Deadlands setting. It doesn't mean that either one's right or wrong. It just means this is the way it works differently in each individual setting. And you can take or leave it, but it's just something to be aware of that is all part of this tradition of slightly tweaking and modifying things, and that ownership the GM has, the elder of your gaming circle has, to modify the story that's being told.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Now, what about the pushback on narrative? You know, the idea of, you know, we talk quite a bit on here about trusting your players to have narrative control. And I think there's an aspect that pushback from GMs who don't want to give up that narrative control is, again, because of the oral tradition. It's the elder's job to tell the story to everyone gathered around the campfire. It's the GM's job to tell the story to the players.
So that kind of like falls in line. A minute ago when we were talking about when you have members of the community that are recognizable. So when you're recognizable, you have a certain level of authority. And because of that, people take what you're saying with a heavier weight. Authority has an unconscious effect. because, people are recognized. I think a lot of times that the GM has to suspend the concept of being in charge. Can't think like a builder. You have to think like you're in a river. And there's that hang up of, well, as the GM, I have the authority. But the truth of it is you have to finesse with that authority. It's sort of like it's mismatched, because we've discussed how in the past GMs won't look at someone and have that adult conversation of, listen, don't pick up other people's dice, don't narrate other people's characters, don't do these things. But at the same time, then they'll take control of the story. And I'm like, no, you're in control of maintaining the social flow with the physical players, but you got to leave your hands off of the story.
I'm going to interject and disagree for the sake of argument. I understand the Gygaxian tradition is I tell you and I describe and I explain. You make dice rolls that inform my decision, and then I tell you what happens. And that's the oral tradition of D&D. Far and away, right? Not turning to another character or another player in the game and going, well, what do you see when you enter the dungeon? No, I describe what you see. I'm the GM.
Absolutely, but I think there's an aspect of if we're going to talk about the Gygaxian root there, you also have to talk about the fact that in the original D&D, the player never rolled the die. The player stated their action, and the GM behind a screen rolled all the dice and then narrated back what happened. The player never picked dice up in the original D&D.
Okay, very good point. Very good point too. But so I think that kind of sets the tradition as when you came into the hobby, what your experience was. I can see that there are certain advantages to that approach, because that way the continuity stays the same because it's coming from one narrative source. So you have this sort of continuity of events, you have this continuity of description that's going on. Do the players have a lot of input into the game beyond their actions? Not so much. Now, here's the other thing too. I think it depends on where your players, where they've been percolating in that think tank of gaming. When they come to the table, there are a lot of players who, if you turn to them and go, you enter the forest, describe what you see, will look at you and go, what? I'm not doing your goddamn job.
Right. They expect you to do it.
You tell me. You're the GM. I don't think a lot of players are comfortable with that. Now, I'm going to say this. I am comfortable with that, and it still catches me off guard as a player when it happens. So I'm comfortable with narrating an entire scene of action, and as a GM, the second I'm a player in a game and the GM breaks that continuity and goes, so you just rolled all the damage ever. Describe what that looks like. There's this slight okay ramp up to it, but a lot of players are not comfortable with being handed narrative.
So
I think something that's always struck me as odd about that is all of those players have something going on in their head that they're picturing as to what just happened. When they see that giant dice roll, they have pictured in their head this visceral action scene to go with it, and yet somehow when they're asked to deliver that to the table, whether it's the lack of social skills that we've talked about, or it's that oral tradition of, no, I'm at this end of the table, they're the ones supposed to be telling the story, or they're used to railroady GMs where the GM is very much about not letting anybody else have that control. Regardless of where it comes from, those players hit a wall. Even if they can break through it and then bring what they had in their imagination out into words for everybody a few moments later, they hit that wall because it's such this continual tradition within the hobby that narration comes from one end of the table.
Right. Where is Jib right now to tell us to go have a brandy and write our fucking book?
Right.
All right. Everybody take a drink. Chris has mentioned the one of the shots for the game.
This is the worst topic for Jim not to be here for, because he would absolutely go off the deep end about it's not your story.
And I don't mean, when I say that the GM is in control of the narrative, I don't mean to say that the GM's in control of the story. I'm not. I don't believe that at all. I believe it's a cooperative storytelling adventure, but narrative control is one of those up in the air kind of topic portions of the game.
Right. Yeah, and I agree with that. I've tried a little bit of that aspect of keeping some of the control, but also like they come into a new town. Basically in my Rifts game, I came up with the town, I came up with the basis, but this whole entire town was built by my players. So you walk up to a diner. What's the name of the diner? They gave me the name, and then I riffed off of that and came up with who the proprietor was and what it was like. And I've run the same Rifts game and this same scenario a couple of times, and my second group added an entire church and added all this stuff to the town that the first group didn't even add. And so this town is growing by two different groups adding to it, and me allowing them to have that control of them saying, okay, yeah, there's this church. Well, what tell me a little bit about the church. Well, it's like this. All right. And so who's the leader of the church? And then I took those three things, kind of the church, what kind of church it was, who was the leader, and I expounded on that. And
Right.
that they seem to really like that and really get into that. And they started going with the flow of they knew I was going to, if they went into a different building or a new place, that I was going to say, hey, what's the name of it?
Yeah.
Well, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that.
Right.
Actually, that's kind of the trend in gaming and in the hobby that exists. But you have to have the right combination of people. You can't serve the ping pong ball across the table and to somebody who's not ready or prepared to return the serve. They're just going to look at you and go, what? And then it's just like this, oh, great. Now we're shooting pool with a spaghetti noodle. I'm not getting anything back.
Right. And I have a third group that I play in that if I ran for them, and there's a couple of people in that group that if I did that to them, they would just stare at me because they don't think they're imaginative enough. They hate when they have to do a dramatic or an interlude. There's two of them, and they just do not want to. They want to have nothing to do with interludes.
They'd rather not have the Benny than have to.
Than have to do an interlude.
Well, right, and there's that aspect of, hey, stop talking to my XP.
Right, you just got to you got to fill out your table.
I had a guy in my Thursday night Savage Rifts game, and he was definitely into Pathfinder and Shadowrun. That's all he ever played. And we got to this point where they had unlocked like a certain level of powers, and I literally gave the guy a bio wizard factory that he could work with. You just kill stuff and throw it in, and you can like I adapted splicers for this so that I created an engineer so that they could make whatever they wanted. And the guy got pissed and left. And he told another guy, it's like, well, if the GM's not going to do his job.
What? See, what this is kind of what we're talking about, right, Dave? This is the oral tradition. I have this tradition of gaming, the way I was introduced. This is the right way to do it. And any other way that you try to do it, that's heresy.
So what you're saying is you have to determine whether your table likes oral or not.
Right.
Everybody likes oral. What you have to determine is whether they're open to it.
Right.
Right.
Do we need an X in the middle of the table? Are we starting to feel triggered and uncomfortable?
No, we don't do safe spaces and triggering. No, we don't do that.
Sorry, I had to throw that out there.
No.
So Dave, Jared asked you a question. I stomped all over it.
Well, I think, at least from my perspective, the idea of it goes back to that whole question between the sandbox and the railroad. The railroad is kind of where the hobby started, and that's that traditional game type. The GM is responsible, not just coming to the table with dice and Mountain Dew and the copy of the books and everything, but the GM is also responsible for bringing the script to the table. They have to have that story. They have to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. They have to have a progression path for the players to go through. And sure, the players get to control their characters' actions, but it's a very narrow corridor that they're going to go down, and that's the expectation. Whereas that more sandbox thing comes from as the hobby kind of expanded and we moved from the tradition of storytelling to cooperative storytelling. And, you know, the old storytelling, the old oral tradition of the elder sits at the top of the campfire and tells a story to everyone about the history, that's the railroad style. Whereas the sandbox style is more the, we're going to all sit around we're all going to sit around the campfire and we're going to throw bits and pieces in to craft a ghost story together as a group. And I think that's the dichotomy there, is that while it's still grounded in that same basic thing, those are two very different styles of play. Both are valid. It just really depends on your group. But I really think that when we talk about the actual oral tradition, we look at the roots of the hobby, the railroad style is more traditional than the other. The other is kind of an outgrowth from it that I think a lot of people find more fun, more engaging, because as a player, I have a lot more I can do at the table if I have some control over the narrative than if all I'm doing is commanding a character in combat while the GM tells me a story.
Right. I would agree that the original, like the Pathfinder, the D&D, comes from that around the campfire elder telling a story. And then you get the newer style of gaming, like Apocalypse World and Fate and some of those others that are more of a, hey, we're all an improv troupe. Let's throw out a few ideas and we'll just all together riff off of it. As long as we're in context and we're helping each other out, we're throwing each other bits back and forth and material that we can work off of. I don't, and I agree. I don't think the latter is as common as everybody would like to think it is. I think there's this kind of perception, this false perception in the hobby that, oh no, it's the heyday, man. It's peace and love. We're all getting together at the table and everybody's into it. We're all role playing our characters, man. And I'm adding to this. No, not so much. You may find a group that you play with who's down with that style of play, and if so, keep playing with them. It's an awesome way to go. But I don't think that that's the natural sort of order of things out in the wild. I think it tends to be more the Pathfinder-esque. I'm going to sit here when it's time for me to swing my sword. You tell me and I'll roll dice, and then you tell me what happens.
I think what it is you have some very vocal, very adamant, up in front groups that are very, this is the new thing and this is so exciting, and they have such sanguine personalities. And the people who have been playing traditionally for decades just sit back and say, hey, I'm going to have some fun and I'm just going to enjoy this and we're going to play and we'll roll die. But they're a silent majority there, and they don't seem to exist because there's so many, there's a very few very vocal, very loud individuals that just sort of drowned everything out. I mean, it's like the Tumblr version of gamers, but they're out there.
Well, I think that goes back to the earlier point about, you get these kind of robust personalities that become the authority, whether it's a podcast host or a blogger or, the guy who decided D&D's just not for me, so I'm going to create this entire thing called the Great Rail Wars, and then it blows up and you end up with Shane Lacey Hensley's Savage Worlds. Shane was originally an author for adventures and things that happened in D&D. That's where the guy cut his teeth in the hobby, and yet here we are now, a couple decades later, playing a game he wrote because he wanted to change up the way that played. And, you get those people end up being the new authority. They end up being the people who are driving forward a change in the tradition where we're going to do it a little differently than we did before. But it still all draws its roots from the same place. It's a different flavor of water, but it all came from the same well.
Right. Yeah, you still roll dice to determine things. You still have skills and traits and attributes, and you still have a character sheet. This is all familiar stuff. It's like a warm, comfortable blanket I can wrap myself in. Wait, we can soak what? We can do what with wounds?
Well, and I think, and there again is also why we have, and we've talked about this considerably on the show too, is the people who come in and they expect it to be like the other game system they've played. I've played D&D for 20 years, and then I played Savage Worlds, and I play Savage Worlds the same way I used to play D&D. And then I'm thrown off when it doesn't play that way, or there's a rule that I didn't know we weren't following, or whatever. And now all of a sudden I find out, wait, you mean I'm supposed to say this instead of that, or I'm supposed to use this skill and not that skill? What are you talking about?
Oh wait, that kobold killed me in one hit.
Well, it's like this too. It's like going on vacation. So it's like going on vacation, even in the United States. Okay, I live in New York. I've lived in New York my entire life. I'm going to go visit California on vacation. This place sucks. You can't get a decent slice of pizza anywhere in this fucking town. This fucking sucks. There's no ice hockey. What the fuck? Hey, it's called a burrito. Soak up the local culture. You came here to visit someplace that was different, and you're complaining because it's not exactly the same as the place you just came from.
Yeah. American tourists in Europe look for McDonald's.
Right. What?
Why? Why would you do that? Don't even do that here. Eat fruits and vegetables. You'll live longer.
I don't know about this fromage bullshit that are trying to peddle over there at that little coffee stand on the corner.
It's cheesy.
What the scone?
What do you mean it's been there for 300 years? What a lame.
Right. Like, you think they'd fix that Tower of Pisa? They didn't even have pizza in there.
So I see that you've put some of Carlin's in the chat here. Dustin, you want to pick one of them up?
Okay, let's see. Which one should I pick up? I think I'm
about the other oral tradition.
All right. So, Carlin Kendrick, what about oral tradition, aka sound base? Players' responsibility to listen and understand and contribute responsibly to the story. Well, you can't do that. It requires that you have mature adults in your group, because mature adults listen and act responsibly. If you've got a bunch of deranged psychos, they're not going to do that.
Okay, I do just want to...
Wow. Okay, first of all, wow.
And we're out.
Okay,
this is the moment where he has gone from Dustin the Savage Intern to Dustin, I learned too much from Jared and Dave.
Okay, Dustin, I'm going to need you to show me in the rule book where the players touched you.
So show me on the consoles.
Right there on the loincloth.
Where the immature player touched you.
Well, he was fine until he invited Jared Savage Daddy into his Deadlands game, and then, oh God, shit just went fucking south fast.
Bananas. First session, he kills Abraham Lincoln.
Multiple warnings. I told you do not want Jared as a player in your game.
I am such a masochist that I enjoyed it.
I just play my dissets. That's all I can say.
What my character would do.
In all seriousness, I think there is an aspect to it of expecting your players to show up to the game, listen to what's going on somebody else's turn, listen to what's going on when the GM is narrating things and be ready to react. I think, unfortunately, there's also other type of players who have no interest in doing that. They are only there to kill stuff. There's other players who want to sit back and never want to contribute, but they want to listen, and they want the GM and the other players to tell them a story.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the players who just want to be on their cell phones.
Oh, wow. So we're going to turn the oral... Okay, go ahead, Chris. Let it out.
Wait, trigger. Wait, I need the X. Quickly. I don't want to go on my electronics rant. Fuck, I hate it so much.
Yes. And why don't you tell us more, Chris?
It's disrespectful, especially when somebody's running a game, in my opinion. I've said it before. If you don't have the time to pay attention to my game, and if you don't have blue cheese for the wings, you can go fuck your mother.
Great Joey Diaz.
There you go.
I'm sorry. What was that? I was checking a text.
Right. No, playing Clash of Clans. That's even fucking better with the volume up.
I gotta say, man, that's like it really kills the mood when people are noisy in the game. Like, even if they're not the ones that are noisy, but they are the cause of the noise, that just kills it for everybody. And sometimes I feel like there are some players that intentionally do that because they don't want anyone else to have fun unless they're either having fun themselves or they're the center of attention. Like, there are sometimes those players that just have to be all stars or no stars.
Yeah, well, you know, everybody has their different version of fun. And you see that nowhere better displayed than this hobby. You've got
That's very true.
Your different types of players that my answer to everything is kill it. There's no other response to just kill it. There's the person who shows up with a bag of wrenches and just sits there and waits to throw a wrench in. I'm a little bit of that guy.
Hey, which one are you, Jared?
Part of my fun is throwing wrenches into the game that I know are going to make Dave go, "What the fuck?"
So I think you need to change your name. It needs to be Jared Savage Wrench Thrower Gunning.
And I know as a player, I have this tendency to where if the group isn't being decisive, I'm going to do something that's going to force a fucking situation. Just because I cannot sit there for 15 minutes while everybody decides to do nothing as a player. So, I mean, but everybody has their different way of doing fun. There's people that want to show up and theater and role play. They might as well show up in a fucking costume. They're not interested in rolling dice. They don't get two shits about their character sheet. I mean, everybody gets their jollies in the game in different ways. Everybody has a different version of fun.
I see what you did there.
What?
I see what you did there, Jared, taking it right back to oral.
Guess what? It's your job. If you're the GM, it's your job to manage that or weed people the fuck out. It's your job to sort of balance that at the table.
Yeah.
Whoa is the role of the GM.
That's true.
Swing low.
Yep. I keep being told by the group that has the cell phone issue that I just need to get over it.
Well, I'll tell you what you can do very easily when they go, well, you just need to go over it. Go, okay, I'm over it. Leave. Goodbye.
Yeah. I'm over.
Goodbye. I'm over it. I'm over you. Take your cell phone. Goodbye.
Yeah, I'm over making it work at my table. And I think this opens us up to that next aspect of it is, another aspect of the oral tradition is there are certain things that are acceptable. There are certain things that aren't. When you were sitting there around the campfire listening to the history, it wasn't acceptable to interrupt the elder. It wasn't acceptable to twist the history and tell the story to the next generation with lies that made you out to be better than the previous generation when they passed along. There were absolutely things that were just considered immediate faux pas that you would be called on. You'd lose your place as an elder if you violated that responsibility that was entrusted to you. And you could be ostracized from the tribe if you violated it from the other direction. So there's absolutely a give and take that's built into that. And I think we've brought that forward as well in that, the GM is the arbiter of all rules at the table. There is nothing that any gamer in the entire hobby thinks worse of than the guy who wants to sit and argue with the GM about a rule and point out, well, if you check page 27, paragraph 4, clause 3, this is how that's supposed to work. Everybody hates that gamer. Why? Because they violate the tradition of letting the GM take that role and guide the table. It doesn't matter if the GM was wrong. Everybody hates the guy who pointed it out because it broke the tradition. It broke the circle. And now we're not telling a story anymore. We're arguing about a rule as to what it says on a specific page of the book.
You have just stepped outside the circle of trust. Yeah.
Or as Carlin Kendrick has just said, that guy at the table that says, well, Clint said.
That's awesome. Clint says it's this way, so get over it.
Let's be fair. The errata that's been piling up on the main site and the forums over the last couple of years since the last edition was printed is getting a little long in the tooth. I don't think it's gonna be too long. We're gonna see a new PDF with all of that rolled in again, because there's just so much out there now that's not in the physical copy of the rules that's been, clarified by Clint through questions on the forums. And again, that's the way these types of things grow is, I didn't know how to do X until someone asked. Or I didn't know you could use that rule to do this other thing until someone asked.
Yeah, right. Yep.
Well, and I think it's one of the things that Dave brings forward very well. It's the responsibility, and feeds back into the oral tradition that Kendrick brought up. It's the listener's responsibility to pay attention and get it right, because sooner or later, they're expected at any time for any one of those people in the tribe to be one of the elders in the tribe that has to tell that story and to tell it. Honestly, I'm sure that there are certain, even in the oral tradition, it's just like playing the game, the grade school game of pass it along. You start with one thing, you get 15 people down the other end of the line, and it's nothing close to what you originally said. I'm sure people added some flavor to it, put a little bit more emphasis on one aspect of the story overall, but the general story passed down from generation to generation of the tribe, same general context, same main character name, and it's the responsibility of the listener to pay attention and get that right. And nowhere is true as in a cooperative storytelling game. Nothing. I hate nothing more than somebody who hasn't said anything for 15 minutes, and then you go, "Okay, it's your turn. What do you do?"
Wait,
wait a minute. How many Indians are there? God damn it! We just said this 5 minutes ago. Look on the fucking screen. That's how many. Why? Are you... Thanks. You bumped it. And I don't think that person's, and I want to say this too, I don't think that player's doing it out of malice or any kind of intent. It's just carelessness when it comes to stepping up to the spotlight and table. You're turning the action. I've done it. You've done it. We've all done it. But it sucks. It sucks at the table that, like, oh, wait a minute. There's what? Wait, who did what? Oh, God. Now we got to backtrack and repeat everything. Jesus.
So Dan Riley asks, and I bring this up just so I want to watch the look on Chris's face.
God damn it.
I mean, like the shake and change that is like 2 years old, but not all GMs use it or even know about it. And I think there is a certain aspect to this that I want to touch on. And this is where we come back to something Chris said earlier. You have a responsibility as a GM to identify which rules you're using, which rules you're not, because again, we have a set of rules. The reason Savage Worlds exists as a physical book of rules is so that if I'm talking about Savage Worlds in Michigan and Chris is talking about it in Denver and Jared's talking about it in Vegas, we all are talking about the same game. It's not me talking about the game that I learned from my GM, Jared talking about the game he learned from his GM, and Chris talking about the game he learned from his GM, and we're all calling it Savage Worlds, but none of it works the same. We have a rule book for a reason. Mm-hmm. Yes, as a GM, everybody has the right to pull out of it what they don't want or add to it what they do, but at the same time, we have a set of rules, a core, tradition for a reason, so that we have this common language to continue to play the game and tell the story with. And I think that's why we see the heated debates and the long diatribes and stuff about, well, play it rules as written, or no, that doesn't work because this other rule is broken by it. And all of that, I think, is all tied into this tradition of I'm passing along the stuff that works at our table, but then you have the whole my table versus the tables of all the other gamers throughout the rest of the world. We're all playing the same game.
Right.
Right.
Well,
yeah.
and I think if there's, I mean, and not to get too deep, not to go too deep down this rabbit hole, but if there's a core tenet of the rule that exists as the official quote unquote sanction rule, shaken being one of them. I just want to put this. I just want to make sure that we roll this out there. Step back one version from deluxe, and shaken's even worse than it is in deluxe, according to the community. Half your pace, you're reduced to half your pace. You there's shaken in Explorer Edition is nasty compared to shaken in deluxe, and then once you do the errata version of, a success is all it takes, whatever. I think if you're going to change a core tenet or you're going to use a previous version, it's the onus is on you as the GM to make sure that you're telegraphing that to the players when they sit down at your table as part of this oral tradition. To go, hey, just so you know, at this table, we run the rules as written as it appears in the printed version of Shaken. And here's the difference. And here's why we're using it. You're not going to encounter this at other people's tables. You're probably going to encounter this. I think there's a decent reason to have that discussion. I'm not saying go, okay, well, everybody get together. Okay, we're going to pull out and we're going to go through the entire rule book and explain every rule that we use and why we use it or don't use it. I'm not talking about that level of in-depth. But if it's a core rule, like, nope, you don't get to soak in this game, you deserve, your players deserve the courtesy of knowing that that's not standard.
Right. Yeah.
Well, and Dan expands on this a little bit, and he goes that he recently played several Savage Worlds games at a convention, yay him, but not one of the GMs used the same mechanics for being shaken throughout the entirety of the convention. And I think that again, like, it only takes playing at 3 or 4 tables to play every version of Shaken that's been put forward. No, I mean, let's stop and think about that for a second. I know this is a contentious rule, but there are, like you said, there's the old Explorers edition, then there's the deluxe edition, and now there's the new errata edition, all of which are a different version of Shaken. It would only take three games to have not played the same Shaken rules twice. So these are things that absolutely are going to come up, and this is again why there's that reliance on the GM being kind of master of that domain and having a common, language to play the game with. When I say you're shaken, if I haven't explained to you what that means, you're going to base it on one of those 3 versions of the rules.
Right. Or your oral tradition in the game may mean that, okay, I'm in Stunlock. No, you're not in Stunlock. You could do things. Yeah. No, I'm shaken, so I'm stunned. I can't do shit. No. You can talk. You can move. You can dive to cover when you're shaken. What? I can? I thought I was just shaken and I'm frozen. No, that's not what that means at all. I mean, feel free as the GM to kind of point that out to players when they're experiencing that as well. Absolutely. It's just a good GM thing to do.
I think part of what people get thrown off on Shaken is the fact that it's the language. It's like, if you've got a concept that is similar to a different system, you have to call it something different in your system. And so calling it Shaken, I don't know if that works because they get the idea that they're tased. But I say you're distracted. You can do anything that you would do if you weren't going to roll a dice for it.
Well, and we've had this conversation too. It can mean different things at different times.
Yeah, it's that oh shit moment.
Yeah.
Oh God, someone kicked sand in my eyes, and I'm oh shit, I dropped my sword and I'm spending the round trying to pick it back up. I just got my bell rung. I literally took a wicked right hook, and or it's that scene from Saving Private Ryan when I land on the beach and I'm not hearing anything, but all this shit's happening. I'm like, I'm taking a second to get my bearings. It can mean any one of those things. And it should Shaken from a philosophical standpoint in the game should change based on the context. Oh, wow. I just lost my camera for no reason. Outstanding. There we go. So, I mean, it can mean any number of things, and it should mean different things based on the context and the situation, what's going on. I know not all gamers care about that. I know not all GMs give two shits about that either, but it is one of the things that goes along with the game. Shaken needs to have a trapping applied to it in order for it to make some kind of sense in the game, other than just the mechanical effect of, okay, I'm limited to free actions.
Yeah. What's happening is an aspect of it that it's a big part of what we do, and without that descriptive, without that narrative around it, the game becomes rather boring to play. You know, if someone's not narrating at least a third of the combat actions aren't being narrated, you're going to lose your players at some point. They're going to check out. That's when they're going to start playing more Clash of Clans on their phone and doing other things, because you're not giving them anything to be invested and interested in at the table.
Okay. We had any other questions from the live stream? I'm not going to go into my shaken rant. We've done it more than 1,000 times.
Yeah,
I think everybody knows where.
I'm going to be quiet.
Everything I know knows where I stand on that.
They know where I stand.
Yeah, blue cheese with wings, or go fuck your mother.
That's exactly right. God damn it.
So my T-shirt's going to say "shaken with a raise" or "go fuck your mother."
Oh, I love it.
Oh, okay.
That's awesome.
Just kidding. The views expressed by Jared Savage Daddy Gunning are not necessarily the views of Jared Savage Daddy Gunning in regard to this podcast.
Please address all hate mail to SWG.
Dustin Smith, the Savage intern, he handles all of our hate mail.
And whenever they actually mail it in, I have to poke it with a stick to make sure it's not a bomb.
Send the hate mail. The Savage cheerleader.
That's right. Make a notice roll before you open that envelope.
Scott, let's see how he responds to hate.
Wait. Wouldn't that be make a notice roll to notice that that's actually a bomb?
Sure. Exactly.
Underneath the car, as
right.
part of the storytelling aspects.
No, okay, and so let's talk about that real quick. Let's talk. I'm gonna forever from now on refer to this as the Peterson effect. The idea that you cannot create tension at the table without keeping secrets. So I'm gonna forever call this the Peterson effect.
The Pearson effect.
Pearson effect. What did I say? Peterson. Pearson effect.
Peterson.
The Pearson effect. The JP effect.
Wait, Jared, aren't you supposed to say never correct me on my show?
I've kind of mellowed after, we're in year 5 now. We're in year 4, so I've kind of mellowed a little bit. I'm not so quick to jump. But it's the Pearson effect. The idea that you cannot have tension at the table unless you're keeping secrets from the players comes from Jamie's tradition and rearing and experience in the game. That's something that's pretty much germane to Pathfinder, the D&D era of the GM's in control of everything. The GM rolls for the players. What's the big deal? I don't understand why I can't do this. Why this isn't the optimal way to do it. This is the way we've always done it. What's wrong with this method? What do you mean? Wait. What are you telling them? What they're rolling to notice destroys the surprise. Yes, but the point is to create tension at the table. It's the same thing as the person watching a horror movie who knows Michael Myers in the basement and the dumb bitch is about to go downstairs to the basement and the light goes off and she's still going downstairs to the basement. As the audience, we know, no, don't, no, there's tension there. Same thing at the Savage Worlds table. You're still achieving the end effect of tension, although your flavor of tension may not be my flavor of tension. I'm okay with letting the player know, hey, how are you getting across town? Oh, you're going to climb in your car. Okay. So you're going to make a notice roll to see the bomb that's been put there. If you don't make this notice roll, the end result is you get in the car and it goes boom. Now, go ahead and make a notice roll. I got a 3. Shit. I'm spending a penny. I got a 2. Fuck! I've only got one penny left. I'm getting tension at the table by doing that. I don't care what my method is. It's no different than, letting him get in the car and then going, oh, okay, he notices the bomb before he turns the ignition. Oh, as you're getting ready to turn the ignition, you notice there's a bomb there. What's the difference? Yeah. Our way is the right way to do it.
Well, I think there's an interesting aspect of that. If we're going to talk about this in the vein of the oral tradition, is that just because it's the way it's always been done, and the way you were shown to do it, doesn't necessarily mean it's the right way. And this is, again, where we talked about earlier, if we're going to talk about the original tradition of the hobby, was the GM made all the dice rolls behind a screen and you didn't have any interaction with that. You just fed the GM your actions in combat. We've branched out from that. We've created new games. We've created new ways of playing where the players have more and more of the narrative control. And I think that at this point, there becomes a question of play the version of it that makes the most sense for you, but certain game systems are written more in line with different ways of playing the game.
Right.
You don't play Savage Worlds the same way you play Fate. You don't play Savage Worlds the same way you play Gumshoe. You don't play Savage Worlds the same way you play D&D.
Right. And just because chess and checkers take place on a checkerboard doesn't mean that the games are the same, right? I mean, that kind of concept, right? You can play all different kinds of games with a poker deck, with a standard, deck of cards, but each game's different. Yeah, and I think, too, that's a little bit of the issue with the oral tradition coming from, if all you've ever experienced is the D&D set and the Pathfinder set, you really have to have a very open mind when you come to Savage Worlds, especially as a GM. In this game. You cannot approach... Well, you shouldn't approach Savage Worlds the way you approach Pathfinder. There are some similarities. You're going to find some similarities, but if you trying to mold Savage Worlds into Pathfinder is so much putting square pegs in round holes and an exercise of frustration. It's just why would you do it?
Well, I think there's a big conversation about the fact that you can play these other games in Savage Worlds. It's supposed to be this genre neutral system that can do all these different things. That's great. It doesn't mean it's going to play the same. You're not going to have the same experience playing that story in Savage Worlds that you would have playing it in Palladium or playing it in D&D or playing it in Fate. And I think that's part and parcel to the growth of the genre, which again is part of that oral tradition, is that each time the game was passed from one GM to the next through, I taught this person how to play the game. And then when they teach the next person how to play, they're going to add the bits and pieces to it that they enjoy. And it's going to slowly morph and be modified. And again, that's that oral tradition that's in our hobby that you have to be willing to accept. But at the same time, you have to accept both the good and the bad that comes with it.
Right. Yep.
Oh, God damn it, Carlin. All right. I'm gonna address this one from Carlin Kendrick. You shit stirrer. Love you, Carlin. Love you. But Vancian magic system. We've had this conversation. You can get a Vancian magic system in Savage Worlds. It's pretty fucking easy. It's called spend your power points and ahead of time.
Alchemist. It does the same thing.
Spend your power points ahead of time.
If you're really, really indebted to wanting that's the thing you have to have. Richard Woolcock really has put a lot of time and effort into creating one, and it's up on his website with all the other stuff he's put out under the Savage Fan license. I mean, at this point, the Vancian magic thing that continually comes up in the social media, and it's like, at this point, if you're not aware of that thing, it really should be the first thing you're pointed to. Here's a way to do it with just spending your PowerPoints in advance, and here's an entire system written that's just a new arcane background for it that's been put out there. And then from there, you can start giving other suggestions. But I mean, there are certain things that just become these repetitive kind of requests because as new people come in, they're not seeing that post from 6 months ago talking about the exact same topic, and where we all roll our eyes and go, yet again, someone's asking, how does heavy weapons work? Or yet again, someone's asking, how do I make a lightsaber? Or, you know,
right. Well, and okay, here's the thing too. I just want to throw this out here about since Fancy Magic came up, and thank you, Garland. Really, I'm joking when I say shit stir. Not really. The thing with Fancy Magic is you have to look at it and go, okay, that's the D&D model of the Magic system. Why would you bring? Okay, not why would you? Is Fancy Magic going to work well in Savage Worlds framework? And I'm going to say not so much, because there's not this number of spells that grows because you level up. Yes, you can buy a new power. I mean, yes, you can get a new spell. You can buy a new power, but the systems, the foundation of the Magic system that both are built on are not equitable. They're not exactly the same. So why would you want to? Why would you want to spend your power points ahead of time instead of having that flexibility in the game system? It's going to having the flexibility in Savage Worlds to say, okay, I'm using this spell now because it's appropriate for me to use it now, instead of, oh damn, I didn't think to prep that one. Does it make sense for a Savage Worlds game where everything's happening at the table quickly, fast, furious? You're supposed to have that flexibility to spread the power points and spend them as you need them. Not, oh, I need to have planned in advance for what we're going to be doing and prepare these and blah, blah, blah. So
I think that kind
you know what? It's like decaf coffee. Here's how I look at the Fancy Magic system coming in Savage Worlds. Yes, I can get decaffeinated coffee. The second I take the caffeine out of it, I'm defeating the whole purpose of drinking coffee, because coffee tastes like ass. It's not supposed to taste great. It's an acquired taste because it's a great delivery system for caffeine. So when I take caffeine out of coffee, what? Why would you do that? I'm going to go to France and eat at McDonald's exclusively. No! Why would you do that?
I love this because you don't even realize that you've stumbled onto the perfect answer. It's an acquired taste, and people drink coffee decaf because they don't want the caffeine, but they still want to socialize in a way that they're used to.
Decaf still tastes like ass.
Yeah, I just like that jolt.
Okay, so unless we have anything else in the community as far as a comment, something we want to address as part of the oral tradition, anybody want to get one last oral joke in?
No, I don't think I do.
All right. So on that note, until next time, this is Jared Savage, Daddy Gunning, for Chris, Dave, and Dustin, saying keep rolling, stay savage.